I'm Rachel, 27 years old, and working in finance with a career I'm proud of. Growing up with controlling parents taught me to value independence, which is why buying my first home felt like such a milestone. Never in a million years did I imagine they'd actually sue me for it. Yes, my own parents took me to court because I purchased a house without their permission. Before I dive into how my own parents dragged me to court for making an adult decision, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for your independence. To understand why my parents would go to such extreme lengths, you need to know what growing up in my household was like. Our suburban Boston home looked perfect from the outside: manicured lawn, beautiful colonial architecture, and a family that appeared to have everything together. But inside those walls, every aspect of my life was micromanaged, especially anything related to money. My father, Gregory, built his career as a financial advisor with an impressive client list. He managed millions for wealthy families, but controlled our household finances with an iron fist. Every purchase required justification, every receipt examined. My weekly allowance came with spreadsheets tracking my spending until I was 18. He would lecture me for hours about financial responsibility if I bought something he deemed unnecessary, like concert tickets or a new outfit for a school dance. My mother, Margaret, maintained our image-perfect home with the same precision. A former corporate accountant who quit to raise me, she channeled her perfectionism into our home and my upbringing. She always supported my father's financial control, reinforcing that they knew best about everything. While she occasionally snuck me small amounts of money for things my father would disapprove of, she never openly challenged his authority. From an early age, I showed interest in business and finance, perhaps ironically influenced by my father. But rather than nurture this interest, my parents discouraged it. "The business world is too competitive for someone like you," my father would say. "You're too sensitive." My mother would add, "Why not consider teaching or nursing? Something more suitable." Their dismissal only strengthened my resolve. High school was a constant battle. I wanted to take advanced business and economics classes. They pushed me toward literature and art. I wanted to work part-time at the local bank. They insisted I focus solely on academics. Every decision became a negotiation, with my parents holding all the leverage. College brought partial freedom. I chose a business program at a university 4 hours from home, far enough for some independence, but close enough that they still expected weekend visits. They paid my tuition and housing, a fact they never let me forget. "We're investing in your future," my father would remind me during our weekly financial check-ins, where I had to justify every expense. Despite their hovering, I thrived academically. I secured competitive internships each summer, built a professional network, and graduated with honors. By senior year, I had a job offer from a prestigious financial firm in Boston, the same city as my parents, but I was determined to establish independence. My first year working was transformative. I excelled at analyzing investment opportunities and developing client relationships. My starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to move into an apartment with my best friend Jessica, whom I'd met during my internship. She became the supportive presence I'd never had at home. My parents hated the apartment from day one. "It's in a dangerous neighborhood," my mother claimed, though crime statistics proved otherwise. "You're throwing money away on rent," my father insisted, though he rejected the idea of me buying property too. "You don't understand the housing market yet." Their real issue was clear: I had made a decision without their approval. As my career progressed, so did their criticism. They questioned my job performance despite my promotions. They criticized my spending despite my growing savings account. They questioned my friendships despite the healthy support system I was building. Every achievement was met with but statements that diminished my success. What became increasingly clear was that my parents never expected me to fully separate from them, especially financially. In their minds, I would always consult them on major decisions, and they would always have veto power. My growing independence wasn't a natural progression in their eyes. It was a threat. By my third year at the firm, I was financially stable, emotionally stronger, and increasingly frustrated with their continued attempts at control. Each phone call ended in tension, each visit in arguments. Jessica witnessed my emotional exhaustion after family interactions and encouraged me to establish firmer boundaries. "You're an adult," she reminded me. "You don't need their permission to live your life." I knew she was right, but decades of conditioning are hard to break. The thought of making a major life decision without their approval filled me with both exhilaration and dread. Still, I was ready to take the next step toward true independence, though I had no idea just how dramatically my parents would react. Everything changed when I received an unexpected promotion to senior financial analyst with a substantial salary increase. After celebrating with Jessica and my coworkers, I sat down to reconsider my 5-year plan. With my new financial position, continuing to rent no longer made the most sense. The Boston housing market was competitive but stabilizing, and interest rates were at a historic low. For the first time, homeownership seemed within reach. I approached the decision methodically, as I'd been trained to do professionally. I researched neighborhoods extensively, considering factors like property value trends, proximity to work, safety statistics, and community amenities. I created spreadsheets comparing the costs of renting versus buying. I calculated potential appreciation rates and tax benefits. I even attended first-time homebuyer workshops to ensure I understood the process completely. My next step was meeting with a mortgage broker, Diane, who reviewed my finances and was impressed with my savings and credit score. "You've positioned yourself remarkably well for someone your age," she commented, contrasting sharply with my parents' persistent concerns about my financial decisions. Within a week, I was pre-approved for a loan that would allow me to comfortably afford a modest but nice home in several of my target neighborhoods. Through a colleague's recommendation, I connected with Stephanie, a realtor who specialized in working with first-time buyers. She wasn't much older than me, but her knowledge of the Boston market was impressive. More importantly, she listened to my needs and preferences without judgment. As we toured properties, she became not just my realtor, but a friend and advocate. The house hunting process was both exciting and overwhelming. I visited over 20 properties in 2 months, tiny condos with great locations, larger homes needing significant renovation, and everything in between. I learned about foundation issues, the importance of updated electrical systems, and how to spot water damage beneath fresh paint. Each viewing was an education. Then I found it, a 1930s craftsman with original hardwood floors, updated kitchen, and a small but usable backyard. At just under 1,200 square feet with 2 bedrooms, it wasn't huge, but it was in excellent condition in a neighborhood of young professionals and small families. The previous owners had maintained it meticulously, and it was within my budget. The moment I walked through the front door, I felt at home. That evening, I shared photos with Jessica, who immediately loved it. "This is so you," she said, pointing out details that matched my aesthetic. My coworkers were equally supportive when I showed them the listing during lunch the next day. Their excitement amplified my own, but a familiar anxiety crept in, telling my parents. I debated whether to inform them before or after making an offer. Part of me wanted to wait until everything was finalized, presenting them with a done deal. But another part hoped that including them might finally earn their approval. After discussing it with Jessica, I decided to tell them after getting pre-approved, but before making an offer, a middle ground that acknowledged their importance in my life while asserting my independence. I invited them to dinner at my apartment, trying to create a positive atmosphere for my announcement. Their reaction was exactly as I feared. My father's face hardened at the words, "buying a house," while my mother gasped as though I'd announced plans to join a circus. "You can't possibly be ready for that responsibility," my father stated flatly. "Homeownership is much more complicated than you realize," my mother added. Despite their dismissal, I stood firm. "I've done extensive research, I'm pre-approved, and I'd like you to see the property I'm considering." I hoped involving them in the process might ease their concerns. They reluctantly agreed to tour the house, but the visit was tense from the start. My father scrutinized everything with critical eyes, pointing out minor imperfections like slightly uneven floorboards and questioning the age of the water heater. My mother ran her finger along surfaces checking for dust and asked about neighborhood crime rates with barely concealed disapproval. The inspection report shows the foundation is solid and all major systems are in good condition, I explained, sharing the documentation I'd gathered. Inspectors miss things all the time, my father dismissed. This neighborhood is overvalued. You're paying at least 15% too much. And maintenance will overwhelm you, my mother added. You work such long hours. Who will take care of the yard? Fix things when they break? I had answers for all their concerns, a home warranty for major systems, a lawn service for the small yard, and my own growing DIY skills for minor repairs. But it became clear their objections weren't really about the house itself. I'm not asking for permission, I finally said as we stood in what would become my living room. I'm making an informed decision as an adult, and I was hoping for your support. My father's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. You're not ready for this level of commitment. As we left the property, the tension was palpable. I'd hoped for acceptance, but their resistance only strengthened my resolve. This house represented more than just a place to live. It was a declaration of independence. And I was ready to make it mine, with or without their blessing. After the disastrous house tour with my parents, I took a day to recenter myself. Jessica reminded me that their reaction was about control, not concern. With Stephanie's guidance, I submitted an offer slightly below asking price, including a personal letter to the sellers explaining why I loved their home. To my delight, they accepted with only a minor counteroffer. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and preparations. I arranged for homeowners insurance, scheduled final walkthroughs, and coordinated with the mortgage company for closing. Throughout this process, I limited contact with my parents to brief text updates, unable to face more criticism during such an important milestone. My father's messages grew increasingly urgent, demanding phone calls to discuss this situation properly. My mother sent links to articles about housing market crashes and maintenance nightmares. I acknowledged their messages politely but firmly maintained my boundaries. I appreciate your concern, but I'm proceeding with the purchase. I'll update you after closing. Finally, closing day arrived. Sitting at that table, signing document after document, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with anxiety. When the seller handed me the keys, tears welled in my eyes. Stephanie hugged me and whispered, "Welcome home, homeowner." Those 3 words validated everything I'd worked for. That evening, Jessica organized a small celebration dinner with a few close friends from work. We toasted with champagne, and they presented me with housewarming gifts, practical items like toolkits and emergency supplies, showing they understood and supported my independence. The contrast between their reaction and my parents' couldn't have been starker. Meanwhile, my phone filled with increasingly frantic messages from my parents. My father's texts escalated from disapproval to outright threats. "You'll regret this decision. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." My mother's approach was more emotional. "We only want what's best for you. Why won't you listen to our advice? We're heartbroken." I spent that first weekend moving essentials into my new home, with Jessica helping me assemble furniture and hang curtains. We painted the second bedroom a cheerful yellow, my first decorating decision that required no one's approval but my own. The simple act of choosing a paint color and transforming a space felt revolutionary. Sunday afternoon, as Jessica and I were unpacking kitchen boxes, the doorbell rang. There stood my parents, unannounced and unwelcome. My father pushed past me into the entryway, while my mother followed with a forced smile and a houseplant. "We needed to see what you've done," my father announced, surveying my partially unpacked living room with obvious disapproval. Jessica squeezed my shoulder in silent support before excusing herself to give us privacy, though I wished she would stay. What followed was the most heated argument we'd ever had. My father paced my new living room, listing all the superior investment opportunities I could have pursued with my down payment money. As he spoke, the truth emerged. He had been planning to direct my finances indefinitely, expecting access to my savings for his preferred investments. "I had plans for that money," he admitted, his voice rising. property in the Berkshires that would have appreciated at twice the rate of this starter home. He made the word sound like an insult. That wasn't your decision to make, I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady. It's my money, earned through my work. My mother began crying, a tactic that had often worked to make me yield in the past. You're abandoning everything we taught you, she sobbed. Moving away, making these huge decisions without us. It's like you don't need us anymore. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. That was exactly their fear. My independence threatened the control they'd maintained throughout my life. My home purchase wasn't just about real estate. It was a declaration that I was building a life beyond their influence. I will always love you both, I said carefully, but I'm 27 years old. I don't need your permission to live my life or spend my money. My father's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what you're doing. When this all falls apart, don't come crying to us. I think it's time for you to leave, I said, walking toward the door with more confidence than I felt. As they stepped onto the porch, my father turned back. You'll be sorry you did this, he said, his voice cold. Mark my words. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it as tears finally came. I had no idea just how prophetic his threat would prove to be. After the confrontation, a week passed with no contact from my parents. I began settling into my new routine, morning coffee on my small back patio, evening walks exploring my neighborhood, learning the quirks of my historic home. The silence from my parents was unsettling, but also peaceful. I dared to hope they were finally accepting my independence. Then came the registered letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning as I was leaving for work. I signed for it without much thought, assuming it was related to my mortgage or property taxes. The return address, Goldstein and Weber, attorneys at law, didn't immediately register as concerning. I tossed it in my bag to read at lunch. During my midday break, I opened the envelope and felt the ground shift beneath me. The formal legal language took several readings to comprehend, but the message was clear. My parents were suing me. The claims were so bizarre I initially thought it must be a mistake. 1. My parents had invested in my future with the expectation of return and consultation rights on major financial decisions. 2. My education expenses constituted a conditional loan that required repayment if I failed to follow their financial guidance. 3. They claimed a right of consultation on all major purchases based on an implied contract established throughout my upbringing. 4. They demanded inspection of my property and financial records to protect their investment. 5. They sought an injunction requiring their approval for any financial decision exceeding $5,000. My hands shook so badly I couldn't finish my sandwich. I excused myself from the break room and locked myself in a bathroom stall, trying to process what was happening. My own parents were taking legal action against me for buying a house with my own money. It seemed impossible, absurd, yet the legal document in my hands was very real. I called Jessica as soon as I could compose myself enough to speak. They're suing me, I whispered, still in disbelief. Who's suing you? She asked, confused. My parents. For buying my house. They're actually taking me to court. Jessica's initial shocked silence gave way to outrage. That's insane. Come over after work. Don't be alone tonight. That evening, Jessica opened a bottle of wine while I read her the full complaint. Between sips of Cabernet and moments of stunned silence, we researched whether such claims could possibly have legal merit. Most websites suggested they didn't, but the uncertain language did little to calm my anxiety. We need a real lawyer, Jessica finally said. Not just internet research. She called her friend Thomas, a corporate attorney who agreed to meet us for coffee the next morning before work. After reviewing the complaint, he shook his head in disbelief. These claims are legally dubious at best, he said, but you need proper representation. This is outside my specialty. He recommended Amanda Chen, a family law attorney with experience in unusual cases. Amanda's office was warm and inviting, contrasting with the cold formality of the lawsuit. She listened intently as I explained my relationship with my parents and the events leading to their legal action. Unfortunately, I've seen similar cases, she said. Not common, but not unprecedented either. Parents sometimes use legal channels when they feel their control slipping. She reviewed the complaint thoroughly. The good news is these claims are extremely weak. The bad news is we still have to address them formally. What shocked me most was Amanda's next revelation. After requesting my parents submitted evidence, she discovered they had documented their financial expectations throughout my life, keeping records of every expense, gift, and contribution with attached conditions. Birthday gifts came with noted expectations of compliance. College tuition payments included terms regarding career choices and future financial decisions. They've basically created a paper trail of their controlling behavior, Amanda explained. Ironically, this will likely help our case, as it demonstrates their unreasonable expectations. We developed a legal strategy focusing on the fundamental rights of an adult to financial independence and the absence of any legally binding agreement. Amanda prepared a motion to dismiss based on the frivolous nature of the claims. Meanwhile, we gathered evidence of my financial independence, tax returns showing my income, documentation of my savings habits, and proof that my home purchase was well within my means. The looming court date affected every aspect of my life. My work performance suffered as I struggled to focus. Nightmares disrupted my sleep. Even enjoying my new home became difficult, as every corner reminded me of the conflict it had caused. The space I had chosen for independence had become the center of a battle I never wanted to fight. My boss, Catherine, noticed my distraction and called me into her office. Expecting criticism, I was surprised when she offered support instead. "Family legal issues are brutal," she said after I explained the situation. "Take whatever time you need for court appearances and consider using our employee assistance program for counseling." Her understanding was a stark contrast to my parents' behavior, reinforcing that professional relationships could be more supportive than family ones. With Catherine's approval, I arranged a flexible schedule for the upcoming proceedings. As the court date approached, my anxiety peaked. I'd never been involved in any legal dispute, let alone one with my own family. Amanda assured me our position was strong, but the emotional weight of publicly confronting my parents was almost unbearable. The night before our first appearance, I barely slept, rehearsing what I might say if given the chance to speak directly to the judge and to my parents. What began as a joyful milestone, purchasing my first home, had transformed into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. Yet beneath the anxiety and hurt, a determination was growing. If my parents were willing to take such extreme measures to maintain control, then this legal battle wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my fundamental right to adult independence. The courthouse was an imposing granite building in downtown Boston, its formal atmosphere intensifying my nervousness. Amanda met me on the steps, professional in a navy suit that contrasted with my parents' attorney's flashier appearance. We arrived early to review our strategy once more before facing the judge. In the waiting area, I spotted my parents sitting stiffly on a bench, refusing to make eye contact. My father studied papers with their attorney, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who projected aggressive confidence. My mother clutched her purse, her face set in the martyred expression I knew well from childhood confrontations. Being in the same room with them without speaking felt surreal. These people who had raised me, who should have been proud of my achievements, were now adversaries in a legal battle. The disconnect between what parents should be and what mine had become created a hollow feeling in my chest. When our case was called, we filed into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the documents briefly before looking up with poorly concealed skepticism. "This is an unusual case," she noted. "I'd like to hear from the plaintiffs first." My parents' attorney, Martin Goldstein, approached with theatrical confidence. "Your Honor, this case centers on a fundamental breach of family trust and obligation. The plaintiffs have invested considerably in their daughter's future with clear expectations of return and consultation." What followed was a bizarre argument portraying my parents as generous investors who deserved control over my financial decisions. Goldstein presented selective text messages where I'd thanked them for gifts, documents showing their payment of my college tuition, and even childhood birthday cards as evidence of their ongoing investment in me. Most disturbing was a family financial agreement my father had apparently drafted when I was 19, a document I had never seen, let alone signed. It outlined his expectations for how my career and finances would be managed, with stipulations about consulting them on all major decisions. My signature was nowhere on it, yet he presented it as though it held legal weight. Judge Reynolds' expression grew increasingly dubious as Goldstein continued. When my parents took the stand, things deteriorated further. My father testified about his financial expertise and his plans to guide my investments properly, revealing his expectation that he would control my finances indefinitely. Rachel has always been impulsive with money, he claimed, despite my professional career in finance. This house purchase was reckless and ignored superior investment opportunities one had identified. When pressed by Judge Reynolds about whether I had actually agreed to his oversight, he admitted, not explicitly, but it was understood. We paid for her education with the expectation that she would follow our guidance. My mother's testimony focused on emotional claims of betrayal and ingratitude. After all we've done for her, she cuts us out of important decisions. It's like she doesn't value our role in her life anymore. Amanda's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. She established that I had never signed any agreement, that I had been financially independent for years, and that my home purchase was well within my means and professionally advised. Most importantly, she highlighted the controlling nature of their expectations. "Mr. Patterson," she asked my father, "do you believe your adult daughter needs your permission to spend her own earned money?" "On major purchases, absolutely," he answered without hesitation. "She doesn't have my experience." Despite her degree in finance and her career as a financial analyst, his dismissive response, "Book learning isn't the same as real-world experience," caused Judge Reynolds to raise her eyebrows. When my turn came to testify, Amanda guided me through my financial history, education, career progression, and the careful process I'd used to plan my home purchase. I explained my relationship with my parents as factually as possible, though my voice shook at times. The pivotal moment came when Judge Reynolds asked me directly, "Ms. Patterson, did you ever agree to give your parents control over your financial decisions as an adult?" Looking directly at my parents, I answered clearly, "No, Your Honor, I never did. I've always been grateful for their support, but I never agreed to surrender my independence in exchange for it. Parental support shouldn't come with lifetime control." After brief closing arguments, Judge Reynolds delivered her ruling without leaving the bench, a sign of how clear-cut she found the case. "The court finds no merit whatsoever in the plaintiff's claims," she stated firmly. "There is no legal basis for parents to control an adult child's financial decisions, regardless of past support. Education and upbringing are parental obligations, not investments with expected returns." She continued with increasing sternness. "Furthermore, this court is troubled by the controlling nature of the plaintiff's expectations. Ms. Patterson has demonstrated financial responsibility and independence. This lawsuit appears to be an inappropriate attempt to maintain control rather than a legitimate legal claim." The final blow came when she awarded me legal fees. "The plaintiff shall cover all reasonable legal expenses incurred by the defendant, as this action was without merit and necessitated unnecessary legal defense." As we exited the courtroom, my parents and their attorney huddled in whispered conversation. In the hallway, my father approached, his face flushed with anger despite their decisive loss. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You've made a grave mistake." My mother stood behind him, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this to us?" she asked, as if I had initiated the lawsuit. For the first time in my life, I felt complete clarity about our relationship. "I didn't do anything to you," I responded calmly. "I grew up. I made an adult decision with my own money. The only mistake here was your belief that you had the right to control me forever." I turned to leave, but added one final thought. "When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than control, I'll be open to that conversation." Walking away was the hardest and most liberating moment of my life. Though tears blurred my vision, I held my head high, knowing I had finally broken free from patterns that had constrained me since childhood. The immediate aftermath of the court victory was a confused jumble of emotions. That evening, Jessica insisted on a celebration dinner with Thomas and Amanda. We toasted the legal victory with expensive champagne, but underneath the celebration, I felt hollow. Winning the case was necessary, but brought no joy. I had legally prevailed against my own parents, a victory that felt like loss. "It's okay to feel conflicted," Amanda assured me, seeing through my forced smiles. Family estrangement, even when necessary, creates grief. Give yourself permission to process that. Returning to my house that night, I saw it differently, not just as my independence, but as the physical manifestation of a family rupture. I wandered from room to room, touching walls and door frames, reclaiming the space emotionally. This was still my achievement, my sanctuary, despite the pain it had caused. At work, the situation had unexpected benefits. Word had spread about my court case, despite my attempts at privacy. Rather than facing judgment, I received quiet support. Catherine pulled me into more significant client presentations, later explaining, "Anyone who can handle that kind of personal pressure while maintaining professionalism has the resilience we need in leadership." Colleagues who had seemed distant before now invited me to lunch or stopped by my desk to chat. Megan from accounting shared that she'd been estranged from her father for years. "It gets easier," she promised. "You build a new normal." The weekend after court, Jessica convinced me to join her for a retreat at a small bed and breakfast in the Berkshires. Away from the city and familiar triggers, I began processing what had happened. Walking through autumn forests, I alternated between tears and moments of unexpected peace. "I feel like I'm mourning people who are still alive," I confessed to Jessica as we sat beside a lake. "You're mourning the relationship you deserve to have with them," she corrected gently. "And the parents they could have been." Upon returning to Boston, I took Amanda's advice and found a therapist, Dr. Samantha Rivera, who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became anchors as I navigated my new reality. "Control dynamics like these don't develop overnight," she explained during our initial assessment. "This lawsuit was just the culmination of patterns established long ago." Through therapy, I began recognizing how deeply my parents' control had affected my development, my persistent self-doubt, my difficulty trusting my decisions, my need for external validation. These weren't character flaws, but adaptive responses to growing up without autonomy. As autumn turned to winter, I channeled my emotions into making my house truly mine. I replaced the living room furniture that my parents had criticized, painted the kitchen a bold blue that my mother would have deemed impractical, and installed bookshelves along one wall for my growing collection of business and personal development books. Each change was both aesthetic choice and personal statement. Professionally, I continued advancing. My focus on work provided stability when emotional currents threatened to overwhelm me. I took on additional responsibilities and mentored newer team members, discovering that helping others navigate their careers strengthened my own confidence. My social circle evolved too. Without the obligation of family visits, I had time to deepen friendships and develop new ones. Sunday brunches with Jessica became a tradition. Monthly book club meetings introduced me to intellectually curious women with diverse perspectives. I joined a home improvement class at the community center, learning practical skills while connecting with fellow new homeowners. About 3 months after the court case, my mother reached out with a tentative text message. "I miss you. Can we talk?" For days I deliberated, consulting with Dr. Rivera about healthy boundaries for any potential reconciliation. We drafted a careful response indicating my openness to communication with certain conditions, respect for my independence, no financial discussions, and no involvement from my father initially. Our coffee meeting was awkward, but not hostile. My mother seemed smaller somehow, less certain of herself. She made halting attempts at normal conversation, asking about my job and house without criticism. When she eventually broached the lawsuit, however, it became clear she wasn't taking responsibility. Your father was just trying to protect you, she explained, falling into familiar patterns. If you would just consult with him on financial matters, I'm sure we could put this behind us. I maintained the boundaries I had practiced with Dr. Rivera. Mom, I'm not willing to discuss financial matters with Dad. That's not negotiable. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be separate from those expectations. She left looking defeated, and subsequent attempts at contact from her dwindled, then stopped. Through therapy, I came to accept that real reconciliation might not be possible if it required me to resubmit to their control. The 6-month anniversary of homeownership became an important milestone. I hosted a proper housewarming party, inviting colleagues, neighbors, and friends who had supported me through the difficult transition. As people filled my home with conversation and laughter, I realized I had created something my parents couldn't comprehend: independence that wasn't isolation, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The holiday season brought fresh challenges. Thanksgiving had always been a major family event in our home, and facing it alone seemed daunting. Jessica invited me to join her family celebration, but I decided instead to host a Friendsgiving for others without local family plans. Cooking my first turkey was a disaster that ended with pizza delivery, but the day was filled with genuine warmth that no perfectly orchestrated family meal had ever provided. As Christmas approached, I received a formal card from my parents with no personal message, just their printed names. I sent gifts to extended family, but not to my parents, unsure what gesture would be appropriate. Instead, I donated to a financial literacy program for young adults in their names, a choice that felt healing rather than petty. These new traditions weren't replacements for family, but the beginnings of a life designed around my values rather than inherited expectations. The house that had caused such conflict became the foundation for rebuilding, not just a physical space, but a manifestation of the life I was creating on my own terms. The 1-year anniversary of becoming a homeowner arrived with beautiful spring weather. I spent the morning planting flowers in my small garden, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 12 months. What had begun as a simple desire for independence had become a profound transformation in every aspect of my life. The healing process had been neither linear nor simple. Therapy with Dr. Rivera continued to be essential as I worked through layers of family dynamics. Recovery from controlling relationships happens in spirals, she explained during one session. You'll revisit old pain points, but with new perspective each time. This proved true as I navigated the year's challenges. Certain triggers, financial decisions, holidays, even compliments on my home, could still activate guilt or uncertainty. But these reactions diminished over time, replaced by growing confidence in my choices. My professional life had flourished unexpectedly. The resilience I'd demonstrated through personal crisis translated to increased responsibility at work. 6 months after the court case, I received a significant promotion to portfolio manager, managing client assets and a small team of analysts. Catherine, now my mentor, noted that my communication style had transformed, more direct, less apologetic, more authentic. Sometimes the hardest challenges reveal our greatest strengths, she observed during my performance review. You've found your voice this year. My relationship with my parents evolved into carefully managed limited contact. After several months of silence, my mother reached out again, this time with a different approach. Rather than making demands or expressing disappointment, she suggested lunch with just the two of us. Our conversations remained superficial, but without hostility. She never mentioned my father or financial matters, respecting the boundaries I had established. My father maintained his distance, sending occasional formal emails about extended family news, but making no attempts at reconciliation. Through therapy, I came to understand that his controlling behavior likely stemmed from his own insecurities and upbringing. This perspective didn't excuse his actions, but helped me release some anger that had been weighing on me. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone back into a position where they can hurt you again, Dr. Rivera reminded me. It means freeing yourself from the emotional burden of resentment. This principle guided my approach to family healing, maintaining boundaries while releasing bitterness. I didn't need my parents to admit wrongdoing to move forward with my own life. my home continued to evolve as I did. I finished renovating the second bedroom into a home office, installed energy-efficient windows, and learned basic plumbing repairs through YouTube tutorials and community classes. Each improvement represented not just increased property value, but growing self-reliance. New relationships entered my life as well. Through a professional networking event, I met David, an architect who approached life with thoughtfulness and respect for boundaries that contrasted sharply with my family dynamics. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately, both of us communicating openly about expectations and needs. When he first visited my house, he noticed details others had missed: the craftsmanship of original moldings, the quality of renovation work, the personal touches that made the space uniquely mine. "You've created something special here," he observed, understanding without explanation what the home represented to me. Through him, I experienced how healthy relationships enhance rather than diminish independence. We supported each other's goals and respected each other's spaces, demonstrating that intimacy doesn't require control. About 9 months after the court case, I received an unexpected letter from my mother, handwritten, not typed or texted. In it, she acknowledged, though not fully, some awareness of the harm their parenting approach had caused. "I've been reflecting on our relationship," she wrote. "While I still believe we wanted what was best for you, I can see that our methods were sometimes too controlling. Your father may never understand this, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to." The letter wasn't a complete taking of responsibility, but it represented progress I hadn't thought possible. I responded with a brief note expressing appreciation for her reflection and openness to continued limited contact. As the anniversary of homeownership approached, I found myself reflecting more philosophically on the nature of family and support. True family, I realized, isn't defined by obligation or control, but by mutual respect and genuine care. The friends who had supported me through crisis, the colleagues who had recognized my potential, the new relationships based on healthy boundaries, these constituted a chosen family that functioned more authentically than my biological one had. The lawsuit that had seemed catastrophic had ultimately revealed strength I didn't know I possessed. By attempting to control me through legal means, my parents had inadvertently forced me to fully claim my independence. What they had intended as punishment had become liberation. I came to understand that independence isn't selfishness, but necessary maturity. Establishing healthy boundaries isn't rejection, but an essential component of adult relationships. These realizations extended beyond my family situation to every relationship in my life, allowing me to engage more authentically with everyone. The house itself took on new meaning. It wasn't just property or even just a home. It was tangible proof that I could trust myself to make significant decisions, that I could create stability on my own terms, that I could build the life I wanted despite opposition. Each mortgage payment became not just a financial transaction, but an affirmation of self-determination. On the anniversary morning, after planting my garden, I wrote in my journal about the journey of the past year. The entry ended with words I couldn't have imagined writing 12 months earlier. "I am at peace with my choices and with myself. The path forward isn't perfectly clear, but I trust my ability to navigate it with wisdom and courage." That evening, I hosted a small dinner for the inner circle who had supported me through everything: Jessica, Amanda, Thomas, Catherine, David, and a few others who had become essential parts of my chosen family. As we shared food and stories in the home that had become both battleground and sanctuary, I realized that the most profound lesson of the year had been about resilience. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth. Sometimes what feels like breaking is actually becoming whole. Sometimes a house becomes the foundation for rebuilding not just a home, but a life. Have you ever had to stand up for your independence against people who claim to have your best interests at heart? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding strength through difficult circumstances. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of resilience and self-trust, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you have the right to build your life on your own terms, even when others try to convince you otherwise.